Victor Gao, a former Chinese diplomat and vice president of the Center for China and Globalization. Mr. Gao, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. We're just hearing there from one journalist there in Taipei who says that it's a welcome trip and the Taiwanese people are happy to have Nancy Pelosi there. They're looking for more US engagement. In fact, she quoted one man as saying, in terms of a threat from China, as China being like a little dog barking a lot but not actually ever doing anything about it.
First of all, allow me to say that Nancy Pelosi's visit was against repeated Chinese government's warning. She disregarded the counseling by President Biden of the United States. She disregarded the counseling of the Pentagon, urging her not to go to Taiwan in that capacity at this time. Therefore, from the Chinese perspective, her visit to Taiwan is a complete provocation and a violation of the One China policy. Now, allow me to mention very clearly, there is only one China, and Taiwan is part of China. And there are 181 countries in the world, including the United States and United Kingdom and all the NATO member states, all the EU member states, all the OECD countries. Every country in Africa except one, they recognize that there is only one China, Taiwan is part of China, and the People's Republic of China is the sole legitimate representative of China.
So while that is not in dispute, the concern is China's aggression and continued aggression, and the concern is that China may attempt to unify Taiwan with the mainland by force. That is what is the worry and the concern.
Allow me to emphasize one thing. The Chinese reunification of the two sides of the Taiwan Strait is the mega trend of our time. It will be achieved before Nancy Pelosi passes away. So she will live to see that big day of the Chinese national reunification.
So can I ask you then, if the Taiwanese people are predominantly saying that they don't want the unification, then will China do it by force?
Listen, ever since the early 1980s, China wanted to promote peaceful unification, meaning we do not want to do this by force. And it has been the dominant Chinese policy up to today. But Nancy Pelosi's visit will reverse that trend. Ironically, her visit will accelerate the process of the Chinese national.
Help us understand what that means, Mr. Gao. When you say that she has accelerated that and it could happen by force, what would that look like?
Well, and as a pawn in his geopolitical rivalry with China. They want to encourage Taiwanese independence. They want to use this as a chip in holding China down, derailing China's peaceful rise. They want to keep sending arms to Taiwan so that they even urge Taiwanese people to fight in the streets against Chinese aggressors. Now, allow me to mention one point. When China launches the reunification, it will not be an aggression. It will not be an invasion. It will be liberating Taiwan. It's exactly what Lincoln did.
But the bulk of the Taiwanese people, just 8% of Taiwanese people want unification. So when you say it will be done peacefully and not by force, I mean, what would that potentially look like? Because Taiwan says it is willing to fight for its democracy, for its sovereignty.
Allow me to mention, the matter of Taiwan will not be decided by the people in Taiwan themselves. It will be decided by the 1.2 billion people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait. In that sense, those who promote Taiwanese independence is only a very, very tiny fraction of the Chinese population.
Of the Chinese population, but not those who are in China. May I ask you then, are you saying that
is saying Taiwan is not part of China, but Taiwan is
what I want to ask you is, Mr. Gao, is that do you believe that a conflict, a confrontation, war is inevitable?
Well, the conflict is not inevitable if countries do not encourage Taiwanese independence, if the Taiwanese government does not encourage Taiwanese independence, and if the two sides of the Taiwan Strait, people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait, start talking with each other about peaceful reunification. This is the only right way going forward.
And if that doesn't happen?
Well, we want to see that happen. You mentioned that former President Ma Ying-jeou met with the Chinese President Xi Jinping a few years ago. That was a very important step in the right direction. President Tsai Ing-wen disregarded that prospect. She wants to be an ally of the United States. She holds herself out as an independent, sovereign country. No, she's misleading the whole world. Taiwan is not a
at the moment, she has the backing and the support of the United States and the Western world. However you may view that,
allow me to mention one point. The support of the United States for Taiwanese independence will not make Taiwan an independent country.
And that's why I ask you about this confrontation. I ask you about confrontation because there are many who say it is inevitable that there will be a confrontation, because should China attempt to take Taiwan by force, the West, the United States, will be drawn in and will retaliate. I mean, that is what part of the strategic ambiguity is all about.
Allow me to put this on the record, and 100 years later, you can look at your file. If a war breaks out leading towards Chinese reunification, the United States will never send officers and soldiers to fight for Taiwanese independence. Why? Because it will mean the United States get itself involved in a resurrected civil war. That will not be in the interest of the American people themselves. The United States will not shed blood for separatism of Taiwan, which will be against the Chinese sovereignty and Chinese independence, and it will put the United States as an arch enemy of the Chinese nation.
Mr. Gao, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.